The sea was merciless that night. Waves crashed against the cliffs as if trying to swallow the world whole, and above the roar of the storm, a single question cut through the darkness. Do you want the truth? Rosen stood at the edge of it all, wind tearing through her golden hair. Will you trust me no matter what I say? She asked softly. In front of her, he watched in silence, tall, unshaken, dressed in authority and restraint. Then he answered, It doesn't matter, and Rosen knew better than anyone how dangerous trust could be. The deeper it grew, the sharper it stabbed when broken. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. So just tell me, Rosen, if it truly didn't matter to him. Then she would tell him the truth. Are you a good liar? The man sitting across from Rosen asked calmly. Rosen leaned back in the interrogation chair, chains clinking softly at her wrists. Outside the narrow window, dark clouds loomed heavily as the Vyheth cut through the restless sea, bound for the Isle of Monte. Not at all, she replied nonchalantly. I've never told a lie. Not once. The man's pen scratched steadily against the paper. But your file says otherwise, he said, lifting his gaze. And I've never told a lie is the exact sentence you repeatedly stated in court. Rosen leaned forward irritably, metal scraping against metal. That damn judge wouldn't listen to me. He didn't react, he simply wrote it down. What is your name? She smirked. Why are you asking that? Unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows my name. It's protocol, he said sharply. Just state your name. Rosen Walker. He didn't look convinced. That's not what we have in the file. But that is my real name, she replied, shrugging. He leaned back slightly. I don't care about that. I'm asking you to confirm the name written here. Her brow furrowed faintly. For a second, the confidence slipped. Rosenhauers, she muttered. He nodded once and continued reading. You were sentenced to 50 years at the age of 17. Imprisoned in Perrine Female Penitentiary. 1 year later, you escaped. According to this, you crawled down a cliff and climbed Dobe Mountain with your bare hands. Rosen listened patiently. You were arrested again 3 months later in St. Vin, after hiding. An additional 25 years were added to your sentence. You were transferred to Alcapez, a maximum security prison. His eyes lifted briefly to meet hers. 5 years later, you escaped again. You evaded the Imperial Army for an entire year. It also states you escaped using nothing but a spoon. He paused. Is all of this true? Rosen smiled wider. Of course it's true, and you wouldn't believe what I had to go through to get that spoon. The amount of time I had to tolerate that disgusting prison guard. He raised his hand with a quiet sigh. I don't need the details, just answer the question. She nodded lightly. Yes, it's all true. Then she lifted her gaze fully to meet his. Her smile faded. The man sitting in front of her was the famous war hero, Ian Connor. There wasn't a single person who hadn't seen his face during the war. Every time aircraft flew overhead, flyers bearing his image would rain down from the sky. When his voice echoed through battlefield broadcasts, everyone would look up, mesmerized. The government knew exactly how to fool people. A handsome young pilot was the perfect medium for propaganda, and in the middle of the chaos of war, they too had needed Ian Connor. And what was your crime? Ian asked suddenly. Rosen blinked, pulled out of her daze. What? I'm asking, he clarified evenly. What was your crime? What got you imprisoned in the first place? I didn't do it. Ian's gaze hardened slightly. As per protocol, just answer what I asked. Insisting you're innocent doesn't change the guilty verdict. Rosen glared at him. Nor does it change the truth that I am innocent. Before they could argue further, the door burst open. Commander, what are you doing? A young man hurried inside, breathing unevenly. Then he sighed. I know you're a stickler for rules, but there's no need for this. Prisoners being sent to the Isle of Monte are the worst of the worst, and... He paused, turning to point directly at Rosen. It's the Witch of Alcapez. You must not let your guard down. She escaped twice. I saw her file. She was just 17 when she murdered her husband, Hindley Howers. Both men looked at Rosen. She nodded slowly. Stabbed him 36 times, she said calmly. They called it a crime of passion, said it came from deep resentment. Her voice wavered. But it wasn't me. I loved my husband. I was a good wife. It must have been some burglar. There were so many people jealous of Hindley. They didn't even carry out a proper investigation. They didn't listen to a word I said. They just threw me into prison. She began sobbing softly. Ian looked at her without emotion. Enough with the act. It doesn't matter what kind of wife you were. You were found guilty. That's final. The sobbing stopped instantly. Rosen sighed inwardly. That didn't work. Maybe because she looked a mess right now. Ian stood up. Nobody believed you were capable of escaping. Yet you did. So what's the difference? Just because you're small doesn't mean you couldn't have done it. All evidence points to you. It's clear you're lying. He stepped forward. Henry, bring her. Henry grabbed her arm and followed Ian out of the room. To Rosen, they were gentle compared to the guards she had faced before. But regardless of who was guard and who was prisoner, it was always a cat-and-mouse relationship. The moment one let their guard down, the other would strike. And Rosen was an expert at seizing opportunities. Her eyes drifted to Ian, more precisely, to his waist. A key hung there, the key to her escape, and she was confident that this time, too, she would triumph. Has the ball ended? Ian asked as they walked down the corridor. Henry let out a long sigh. Of course. We couldn't possibly let the guests see the witch. Not everyone is as fearless as you, Commander. Many things had changed after the war. The Vyheth, once a military supply ship filled with smoke, gunfire, and wounded soldiers, had been transformed into a passenger steamer. Where there had once been blood and chaos, there were now chandeliers, music, and elegant dances. And its destination, newly redecorated and advertised, was the Isle of Monte. It was almost comical. The prisoner being sent to that infamous island was sharing the same ship with the wealthy elite, who treated the gruesome place like a tourist attraction. Ian led them outside. The wind blew gently, the sea shimmering under the moonlight. The night was beautiful, especially for someone being sent to the Isle of Monte for life. You dug the tunnel out of Alcapez and crawled through it with your bare hands, correct? Ian asked. Rosen turned to him. Yes. But why are you asking that again? She said, confused. He studied her profile. People say you used magic. Is that true? Rosen understood immediately where that rumor had come from. The last person who had escaped Alcapez before her was a witch, and that was 36 years ago. So when the media learned about Rosen's escape, they reached the simplest conclusion. She must be a witch too. After all, people are always afraid of what they cannot understand. Even in an era where magic was suppressed and science was revered, traces of the old world still lingered. Witches had diminished in number. They had hidden themselves, carefully, where they could not be seen. But that did not mean they had completely disappeared. Do you really think I would have ended up like this if I were a witch? Rosen snapped. Getting caught again after escaping? Letting you put handcuffs on me? Henry scoffed loudly. Don't let her fool you, Commander. We just saw her act. She can deceive anyone. Rosen's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice dropped to a whisper. Consider yourself lucky. If I were a witch, I would have sewn your mouth shut first. Henry stiffened. She turned back to Ian. In fact, I passed the magic stone test. What more proof do you need? Or do you have so little faith in your own army? Henry's temper flared instantly, but Ian's voice cut through the tension. Henry, hands off. His tone was firm. Or I will report you to higher command. Now bring what I asked for. Henry hesitated, then walked off reluctantly. Ian faced her again. Rosen Howers, he began evenly, you are the most notorious prison escapee in the Empire. I don't care whether you're lying or whether you're a witch. I'm simply informing you of a few facts. She watched him carefully. First, you are convicted. That verdict is final. You are sentenced to life on the Isle of Monte. Second, I was ordered to personally transfer you there. He paused. Third, there have been prisoners who escaped from Alcapez in the past, but no one has ever escaped from the Isle of Monte. It's impossible. His gaze sharpened. Even for a witch. Rosen froze. It was meant to crush her, spirit. But her eyes drifted again, briefly, to the keys at his waist. Those keys were for her handcuffs, or perhaps for the lifeboats. Either way, if she was going to escape, it had to be before they reached the Isle. Henry returned, carrying what Ian had requested. Meat. Rosen's eyes flickered with confusion. What was he planning? Ian took the meat and stepped toward the railing. Watch carefully, he said calmly. See what the ocean can do. He threw the meat into the dark water. In an instant, the surface erupted. Whales surged violently, tearing into it with terrifying force. Henry smiled coldly. See, witch? Watch what those creatures can do. Rosen's face paled. She had to think. Quickly. Anything. Ian removed his keys deliberately and stepped closer to her. Taking a lifeboat might seem like a good option, he said quietly. I noticed you eyeing these, but I hope you've come to your senses now, Rosen Howers. In that moment, Rosen realized something. Ian Connor was no gentleman. Whatever image the flyers had painted, whatever heroic voice had echoed through the skies, that man did not stand before her. To the people, he was a hero. To her, he was no different from all the guards she had encountered before, and she should have known better. With that, Rosen was escorted back to the lower prison quarters of the ship. Hey, Maria's voice rang out the moment she stepped inside the cell. Are you really not going to tell me? You met Ian Connor, right? Rosen shot her a straight look. What are you getting at, Maria? Maria raised an eyebrow, a teasing grin spreading across her face. What do you think I'm talking about? A young and pretty prisoner? And a handsome commander? Oh, come on, Maria, Rosen sighed. Ian Connor, of all people, won't be desperate enough to touch a woman. And a prisoner at that. Maria chuckled. But that worked for you in Alcapez, so why not try flirting with him? Rosen's expression turned serious. She lowered her voice. It's not that simple. The sea is filled with monsters. Maria grabbed her shoulder firmly. Hey, you're not giving up, are you? She asked, her tone suddenly sharp. Rosen met her gaze. She had first met Maria in Alcapez. And if anyone deserved to be called the Witch of Alcapez, it wasn't Rosen, it was Maria. The guards ruled the prison from the outside. Inside, Maria was queen. Anyone who dared upset her soon turned into a corpse. When Rosen had first been transferred there, she was already infamous because of her first escape. Perhaps that was why Maria had taken a liking to her. Because of that, Rosen's days in Alcapez had been far easier than they should have been. She hadn't understood at first why the other inmates treated her with such strange respect. Now she did. They all wanted her to win. They all placed their faith in her. They idolized her, believing she could humiliate the Imperial Army and escape once again. You know me, Maria, Rosen finally replied. I never give up. Maria grinned. That's my girl. She offered her a cigarette. As Rosen held it between her fingers, her thoughts drifted. Ian Connor. He used to be a pilot, she murmured. Why did he leave the Air Force and come here? Maria shrugged lazily. No idea. We just need to work on seducing him so we can get out of here. Rosen shook her head slightly. That only worked on foolish men. Ian Connor was not one of them. And besides, she was completely out of ideas. Even if she managed to steal the key and reach a lifeboat, would she survive those creatures in the sea? Obviously not. And even if by some miracle she did, she would die of thirst and hunger before reaching land. As her mind spiraled with thoughts, she heard a soft sound outside the prison room. She looked out. A little girl was playing with a ball. Rosen frowned. What was a child doing near this area? Concerned, she called out gently. Hey, you shouldn't be here. Go back to your parents. The little girl turned, and instead of leaving, she walked closer. Hello, she said brightly. My name is Lila Reville. Reville? Rosen's eyes widened slightly. Do you happen to know Henry Reville? The girl nodded happily. Yes, he's my uncle. Rosen scoffed under her breath. That foolish man let this child wander here? You shouldn't be here, Rosen repeated softly. This isn't a place for children. The girl's eyes immediately filled with tears. But I already told all my friends that I'd get to meet Rosen Walker, the famous escapee in the land. All the grown-ups said she was on this boat. Rosen Walker, Rosen murmured in surprise. The girl smiled again, her tears gone just as quickly. Yes, my grandpa is the captain of this ship, so I told everyone I'd meet Rosen. But nobody believed me. For a moment, Rosen simply stared at her. Then she smiled faintly. Well then, she said softly, it's your lucky day, Lila. Because I am Rosen Walker. Above deck, the night felt lighter. Henry was still complaining, while Ian leaned casually against the railing, laughing softly. You're overthinking this, Ian said. Take it as a vacation. Enjoy the scenery for once. Henry exhaled sharply. About that woman, Ian glanced at him. She's also from Ryerton, Henry continued. It says she was living outside the city when she committed the crime. Ian's expression shifted slightly. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine, Henry said quickly. I'm just saying, she's from Ryerton too. That's why I mentioned it. I thought maybe that's the reason you're paying her extra attention, Henry explained. Ian didn't answer immediately. Ryerton, their home, the city where they had grown up, where they had attended the military academy, where they had flown their first planes. Ryerton, the city that had later been reduced to rubble under relentless air raids during the war. I know, Ian finally said quietly. Of course you know. I gave you the file, Henry muttered. Still, it's annoying how lucky she is. She escaped when the city was being bombed, and now she's being escorted to the Isle of Monte by Sir Ian Connor himself. Ian looked at him calmly. Yes, he said. But don't forget, it's the Isle of Monte. Henry nodded. I know, but still, at least she's alive. Whether it's the Isle of Monte or anywhere else. Memories crept in, uninvited and sharp, him running, calling their names, crying as smoke swallowed the streets. And when the chaos settled, all he found was a single locket stained with blood. Inside it, a broken image of a mother and child. Below deck, Lila beamed the moment Rosen confirmed who she was. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. But can you really use magic? Lila asked eagerly. Rosen paused. Then she smiled gently. Lila, will you answer a few questions for me first? Then I'll show you some magic. The little girl fidgeted, but Grandpa said never to do favors for prisoners. It's nothing serious, Rosen assured her softly. I'm just curious about something. Lila hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Do you know a man named Ian Connor? Rosen asked. Lila's face lit up. Yes, he's my uncle's friend, and the best pilot in the world. Are you close to him? Rosen asked. Lila tilted her head. Not really. He's a little scary. But Uncle says he loves me very much, he just doesn't show it. And he's my uncle too, I think. I'm not really sure. Rosen absorbed that quietly. Is he married? She asked casually. Or does he have a girlfriend? No, Lila replied confidently. He's not married. All the other uncles keep telling him to get married, but I don't think he wants to. Have you ever seen him with any ladies? No. Why? Lila asked curiously. Rosen hesitated. What she wanted to ask next was harder to phrase. Lila, have you ever seen Ian being compassionate? What does that mean? Lila blinked. From behind the bars, Maria chimed in lazily. Compassion means feeling sorry for someone, like letting a drenched puppy into your house, that kind of thing. Oh, Lila brightened. You mean love? Rosen gave a small, careful smile. Yes, exactly that. Lila thought for a moment, her brows furrowing in concentration. I don't think he's full of love like that, she answered honestly. But he's a good person. He's a hero, you know. Rosen laughed softly at the child's innocence. Yes, thank you, Lila. Then she leaned closer to the bars. Now, let me show you some magic. Do you have something you can give me? Oh, I have a coin, Lila said excitedly, handing it to her. But what are you going to do with it? I don't know, Rosen said lightly. When it comes to magic, you always need a medium. With a swift flick of her fingers, the coin disappeared from her palm. Lila gasped. It disappeared! Rosen smiled and smoothly slipped the coin out from behind her fingers, holding it up again. It didn't disappear, she said gently. Here. Take it. Back. It's your lucky coin. Lila clutched it tightly. And here's the secret, Rosen whispered. At sundown the coin will turn into gold. But you must not tell anyone, okay? That will break the spell. Lila nodded enthusiastically, eyes shining with excitement. Then she ran off happily. Maria's voice drifted from behind. Was that really magic? Nope, Rosen replied, waving her hand dismissively. Just a simple trick, she'll realize it soon enough. Maria gave her a look. I thought you don't lie. You always say that. Do I? Rosen asked calmly. Yes. You said if you were a witch, you wouldn't be here. Rosen lay down on the floor. But where could I possibly go? She murmured. Even if I jumped from here in the middle of the ocean? Maria paused, lowering her voice. Hey, she said quietly. Even if you can't make it all the way to land with a lifeboat, there's somewhere else you could go. They say there's a place where witches hide. No one knows if it truly exists. She was talking about the Witches' Island, Valpurgis. You've heard of it, right? Maria asked. They say it isn't far from the Isle of Monte. Rosen knew the rumors. They called it the Witches' Island for a reason. Not everyone could go there. Maria said it half-jokingly anyway, then smirked. Still, forget about fairy tales. Focus on deceiving that Commander Ian Connor. Rosen looked down thoughtfully. It wasn't easy. Using a war hero's pity sounded tempting, but the old tactics she once relied on would not work on Ian Connor. He was someone who had always been on the winning side of history, a hero, a man accustomed to triumph. So she would have to offer him another kind of triumph, not love. Tempting him with that would be easier than love. Above deck, Ian stood with Henry. He remembered the advice he had once received about Henry. If he needs to vent, let him speak, don't interrupt. So Ian remained silent. Henry's frustration shifted again as they walked. They want to make you suffer, Henry, muttered bitterly. They want to put blame on you for failing to protect Riordan. That's why they sent you here. They want you to drag down Riordan's witch with your own hands. Ian didn't respond. Everyone resents her, Henry continued. She's the only one who survived. If you personally escort her to the Isle of Monte, they'll praise you all over again. He sighed. Once this is over, you should live your life. You've got nothing but a glorious future ahead. Ian's gaze drifted to the dark horizon. A glorious future? When the war ended, he had marched beneath the Arch of Triumph. Crowds had chanted his name. Flowers had rained down around him. Had it made him happy? Had he ever felt proud? He couldn't remember. You can't protect everyone, Henry said firmly. There's no such thing as a perfect victory. You're not a god. And forget about Rosen Walker. I'll handle her. No, Ian replied quietly. I'll take care of it myself. You focus on getting better. They parted. Ian returned to his quarters and sat down. Henry's words lingered. It wasn't your fault. Those airborne missions had barely made sense. If it hadn't been for Ian, they might have failed entirely. But then, who was responsible? If he wasn't at fault for the deaths, then who was? The order echoed in his mind. Transfer the prisoners to the Isle of Monte. Pay special attention to Rosenhauers. Rosenhauers, prison escapee, born and raised in Riordan, the sole survivor of the bombing. She was alive. And he... Before his thoughts could go further, a voice broke through. Hey! He looked up. What do you want? Rosen demanded sharply. Why did you call me here? Are you even listening? Ian blinked out of his thoughts and closed the file in front of him. Right, he said evenly. Let's continue. He began repeating the regulations again. Why she was not allowed to leave the ship, why escape was impossible, why the lifeboats were guarded. Rosen's temper snapped. She swept the papers off his desk in one sharp motion. They're enough, she snapped. I get it. You don't have to repeat it. I'd be a complete idiot to even think about escaping. Do you think I'm stupid? Ian let out a slow breath. There isn't much difference between a hero and an idiot, he replied calmly. Neither lacks courage. Even you are considered an anti-hero by some. His gaze sharpened. But to me, you became an idiot the moment you chose to run. Rosen scoffed. So what? You think I should have quietly served 50 years? She leaned forward. Tell me then, hero, what should I have done? She had learned something about this man. He reacted more when she provoked him, when she spoke boldly, than when she cried and acted weak. You should have admitted to your crime, Ian answered. You would have received a reduced sentence. You might have been transferred to a lower security prison. Rosen laughed bitterly. Then I would have been in Riordan when it happened, she shot back. And I'd be dead. Her voice hardened. And I still don't understand. I didn't kill him. And even if I did, why 50 years? That's the maximum sentence for murder. Ian pointed at the document. It's written in the legislation, but... He stood up. Being sentenced to life and sent to the Isle of Monte. That was your own doing. With that, he turned toward the door. Rosen's heart skipped. If he left now, she would be back to square one. Worse, she might not get another chance. Anything would do. Even nonsense. Then what's the difference between you and me? She called out quickly. Ian paused. You said heroes and idiots are the same, she continued. Then you're an idiot too. Nobody believed we'd win the war, she went on. We're an empire in name, but we're small and weak. We fought a country that brought nations to their knees, and we won. Her voice sharpened, but only in name. What did we gain from it? Ian's fist tightened at his side. The people are broken. The land is ruined, Rosen continued, stepping closer. And you, the so-called hero, are standing here in uniform, transferring a prisoner to a place like that. She poked his chest. In the next second, Ian grabbed the chain of her handcuffs sharply. Shut your mouth, he ordered. Rosen got him, so she pressed further. So you call this a victory? She challenged. Don't talk about things you don't understand, Ian warned. But she didn't stop. She waited for his patience to snap. She braced herself. She was used to pain. She expected the blow. Instead, a loud bang echoed through the room. Ian's fist had struck the door, not her. Rosen Howers, he said through clenched teeth. You're right. She froze. But you don't have the right to say that. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with restrained fury. So many of my comrades were injured. So many died. History will not remember them. It never does. His breathing was heavy now. They lost their youth, their lives, for the public. We never expected people like you to be grateful, people who only know how to run. But at the very least, his voice lowered. Don't insult them. Rosen stepped out of Ian's cabin, her grip tightening around the cold chain at her wrists. What had she expected from that man? There were times during the war when his voice had echoed through the sky, carried by broadcasts. She had listened to it for hours back then. And now that she had heard it in person, perhaps she had been foolish enough to think that if she kept talking to him, one day he might answer her in that same calm, warm tone. What an idiot she was. You braided your hair, washed your face. Now what? Henry said sarcastically as he walked beside her. Need some makeup too? Why not? Rosen replied dramatically. Don't be ridiculous, Henry muttered, grabbing the chain of her handcuffs more firmly. Don't try those tricks. He won't fall for it. Rosen sighed. He was right, and she almost wished Ian Connor were half as easy to manipulate as this man. She smiled suddenly. Or perhaps you're the one who's attracted to me? Henry nearly choked. What are you even saying? Let's just walk in silence. As they turned the corner, Rosen's eyes caught sight of Lila again. The little girl was wandering alone. A flicker of concern crossed her face. Would she really be all right, roaming around like this? Her gaze shifted back to Henry. He was fumbling absently with the keys at his waist. They really did look alike. Rosen leaned down slightly. Your niece is adorable. Lila, right? Henry stiffened. What? How do you know her name? As he turned back hurriedly, the keys slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Rosen smiled sweetly. Don't worry, what could I possibly do in cuffs? Henry sighed as he picked them up. You really are a witch. But stay away from Lila. He turned again. That was when Rosen saw it. Lila was clutching her throat. Her small body trembled. Her face had turned pale. She was struggling to breathe. Henry! Rosen's voice sharpened. We need to call a doctor! Henry turned and froze. Hey, snap out of it! We need a doctor! Rosen shouted. But he stood there, stunned. What was wrong with him? Useless. Rosen began shouting for help, but the corridor was empty. She turned back to Henry urgently. I can help her. Uncuff me. Memories flashed in her mind. Why do we even need to learn this, Emily? She had once complained. Of course we need to, Emily had replied patiently. People die all the time during war. Human life is fragile. But you don't need this knowledge to cure people, Rosen had argued. And why should we even save them? It's not like anyone's grateful. Emily had smiled softly at her. Rosen, no one can save the world alone. Not everyone can wield magic. But there comes a time when we all require its power. The words rang clearly in her mind now. Rosen rushed toward Lila. Moments later, people began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Murmurs spread through the corridor. That young lady saved the child. Rosen sat frozen. On the floor, Lila cradled in her arms. The girl's breathing slowly steadied. After a while, Rosen whispered softly, relief flooding her voice. I saved her life, Emily. Finally, Henry snapped out of his shock and rushed forward. Lila, are you okay? He asked urgently, kneeling beside her. One of the guest ladies stepped forward. I didn't see everything, but that young woman was holding the child and performing first aid. It looked like she was choking. Rosen remained seated on the floor. Her eyes drifted to the small candy lying nearby. The one Lila had been choking on. Such a tiny thing, so harmless looking. Yet it had almost taken a life. Maybe this candy was just as lethal as a bullet. You didn't have to be a soldier to save someone. And you didn't have to be a soldier to kill someone either. You were right, Emily, Rosen thought quietly. A faint smile touched her lips. Hey, she said lightly to Henry, did you see that? If you want to thank me, she continued, lifting her chin slightly, I'd appreciate some water to wash myself. And maybe some decent food sent to my cell while you're at it. Before Henry could respond, another voice spoke. I will see to that. Rosen looked up. Ian Connor stood there. Before she could say anything, a trembling voice echoed down the corridor. Oh, my child! Are you all right? Grandpa! Lila cried, rushing into the old man's arms. Rosen watched silently. So, this was the captain of the ship. Lila's grandfather. She glanced back at Ian. I was just joking. I don't need a reward. It's not difficult, Ian replied calmly. Soldiers always pay their debts. You may be a prisoner, but you are no exception. He reached for her wrists and fastened the handcuffs back on. But this remains. Hey, Rosen protested. Then how am I supposed to wash myself? I'll have someone assist you, Ian replied evenly. Ian Connor, the old man's voice thundered behind them. Who taught you your manners? It certainly wasn't me. How dare you put a lady who saved Lila in chains? But that's the rule, Captain Reville, Ian answered firmly. Let her enjoy her freedom. For the moment, the captain insisted. Where would she even go in the middle of the ocean? I cannot ignore the law, Ian argued. That law applies on land, the old man retorted sharply. On the Viheth, I am the law. Rosen almost enjoyed the exchange. But when her eyes fell on Lila again, alive, breathing, smiling faintly, she felt nothing but relief. Captain, she is a prisoner, Ian insisted. The old man gently patted Lila's head. To me, she is the hero who saved my granddaughter. He then turned toward Rosen. Lady Howers, please forgive this foolish young man and his rudeness. Accept my sincere gratitude. Then he paused, realizing something. Oh, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself properly. He straightened slightly. I am former Navy Admiral Alex Reville. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Who hadn't heard of Alex Reville? His statue, depicting him standing firm against the enemy, was a famous tourist attraction. She cleared her throat. Captain, I am no lady. And not Howers either. My name is Rosen Walker. You probably already know. Yes, Miss Walker, he said warmly. But if it weren't for you, I might have lost my only grandchild. He studied her thoughtfully. I heard your request, he continued. But treating you like a hero inside that cell would be a disgrace. So, Miss Walker, he said kindly, if you have nothing scheduled tomorrow evening, would you do me the honor of joining us for dinner? Rosen couldn't even imagine herself sitting at such an elegant dinner table. Crystal glasses, fine cutlery, silk gowns. It felt absurd. She opened her mouth to decline, but Captain Reville raised a gentle hand. You don't need to worry so much, he said warmly. It's just family. Before she could respond, Ian stepped forward. Captain Reville, I don't think that would be appropriate. He paused. His eyes met Rosen's. What was he about to say? A murderer? A witch? Someone lowly who doesn't belong among us? Filthy? Dangerous? Suddenly, an old memory surfaced in Rosen's mind. It is always my hope that my aviation corps will better protect all of you. That gentle voice. She had listened to it countless times during the war, cheeks flushing as it echoed through the broadcasts. Now, because she's a murderer, Ian finished coldly. The voice did not match the one in her memory. Not at all, Rosen scoffed lightly. Thank you, Captain Reville, she said smoothly. I'm deeply honored. How could I possibly refuse a good meal? She accepted the invitation, cutting Ian's protest short. Ian stared at her in disbelief. Rosen avoided his gaze, but her thoughts drifted back again. Those flyers again, Rosen? Emily had once teased when she saw her collecting them. I just saw them on the ground, Rosen had said casually, gathering the papers with Ian Connor's face printed across them. Emily had sighed. You're head over heels. Just be careful Hindley doesn't see them. Rosen had only half listened. Her entire attention had been on the man in the picture, Ian Connor. It was difficult for her to admit now that she had once admired him so deeply, and each time he reminded her, through his cold words and rigid stance, that he was nothing like the man of her dreams, her anger rose uncontrollably. He should have remained nothing more than a distant fantasy. But no. Her life had always had a strange habit of dragging her exactly where she never wanted to go. The next day, an attendant arranged by Captain Reville led Rosen to a private bath. Steam filled the room. Rosen lowered herself into the hot water, and for a brief moment, it felt like heaven. She had accepted the captain's invitation only to irritate Ian Connor. But this was unexpectedly good. She couldn't even remember the last time she had bathed like this. Yet she knew better than to grow attached. Warmth had always been a luxury in her life. She had been an idiot once, clinging to small comforts as if they would last forever. Not anymore. Outside, raised voices broke the quiet. Henry had arrived. You can't go in, the attendant insisted. It's Commander Connor's order, Henry replied firmly. Hearing the commotion, Rosen stepped out, wrapping a towel around herself. What is it? She called. Do you have something to say to me? Henry immediately covered his eyes. You are aware that I'm a man, right? He muttered awkwardly. He turned to the attendants. Wait outside. I have something confidential to discuss with her. It won't take long. They hesitated, but at the mention of Ian Connor's name, they obeyed and stepped out. Rosen narrowed her eyes. So what is it? Rushing in here and forcing everyone out? Henry sighed. Just stay there. I'll leave once I'm done. Rosen slipped back into the tub behind the screen. You're a terrible liar, she said coolly. Ian Connor would never order you to come into my bath. At most, he'd tell you to guard the door. So whatever it is, say it without using your boss as an excuse. Henry hesitated. Then he said quietly, It's about Lila. Rosen's expression softened slightly. Oh? How is she? She's fine. The doctor saw her last night. Rosen nodded, but it was Henry who didn't seem fine. Are you really a pilot? She asked casually. You didn't look very brave last night. Henry fell silent for a moment. Then he spoke. I had a sister and a brother-in-law, Lila's parents. Rosen didn't interrupt. You know Ryerton was bombed during the war, right? He continued. Were you there that day? Rosen sighed softly. No, she hadn't been there. That was the day she escaped prison for the first time. It was only later, in Alcapez, that she learned what had happened to Ryerton. My sister was there, Henry said quietly. Lila was just a baby. Rosen listened in silence. When she had first heard about the bombing, she hadn't believed it. How could a city as large as Ryerton simply disappear overnight? You know, I could have stopped it, Henry murmured slowly. But I didn't. It wasn't something that concerned Rosen directly. But still, why didn't you stop it? She asked quietly. Henry exhaled. That day, we ran into enemy aircraft in our airspace. It was chaos. Their fleet split into two groups, one heading toward Malona and the other toward Ryerton. He swallowed. Malona was the capital city, and Ryerton was our hometown. Rosen listened in silence. It was Commander Ian Connor who had to decide, Henry continued. He said, "We will defend Malona." He let out a long breath. It was the right choice. I don't blame him. There was nothing more we could have done. He looked down at his hands. During the war, I kept going, but when it ended, my head broke. I couldn't fly anymore. That's when I realized I wasn't the man I used to be. He paused. But I still have Lila. The room fell quiet. So is that why you hate me? Rosen asked slowly. Because I'm the criminal who survived, while your innocent sister died? Henry didn't hesitate. Yes. Rosen nodded faintly. I see. That's understandable. Then go on hating me. Just as people needed a hero to worship, they also needed a witch to blame. Two sides of the same coin. Henry took a breath. But I came here to apologize, he said at last. Without you, Lila wouldn't be here. His voice softened. Thank you for saving her life, Rosen Walker. Outside, the attendants shifted nervously. They wanted to step in, but how could they, if it was supposedly Commander Connor's order? Then their eyes widened. Ian Connor himself had just arrived. Inside, Rosen peeked from behind the screen. Thank you, she said lightly. Then how about showing me how grateful you are? Her gaze drifted toward the keys hanging at Henry's waist. Never, Henry said firmly. Don't even think about it. Rosen smiled. Why do you treat me like that? Because I'm a prisoner? Do you really believe I killed him? Henry stiffened. What if I didn't? She continued softly. And even if we pretend I did, what if he deserved to die? Henry clutched his head. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Don't trick me. Rosen laughed quietly. Fine, forget the keys. How about another favor? She stepped closer, lowering her voice, whispering something near his ear. Henry's eyebrows rose. What are you up to now? Nothing, she replied sweetly. Just asking for a small favor. The door suddenly swung open. Ian Connor stood at the entrance. What on earth is going on here? He demanded furiously. Henry's face paled the moment he saw Ian at the door. It's not what it looks like, he blurted out. Ian's eyes shifted to Rosen, then back to Henry. Are you really going to try to convince me of that right now? He asked coldly. Henry hesitated. Well, you see, I needed to talk to Rosen Walker. Ian's jaw tightened. Get out. Now. Henry didn't argue further. He stepped out, knowing very well he was already in trouble. The door shut. Ian turned slowly toward Rosen. Without a word, he grabbed a large towel from the side. Rosen Walker, he said stiffly, pointing toward the sofa. Please sit there. She hesitated but obeyed. In the next second, he wrapped the towel securely around her, covering her properly. She looked up at him. He seemed angry, but there was something else there too. Silence lingered. He looked awkward, almost uneasy. Finally, he spoke. Did Henry do something against your will? He asked carefully. I mean, did he force you in any way? Rosen blinked. No. Ian's gaze didn't soften. You can tell me. If you want, I can arrange a different guard for you. She studied him. Why was he doing this? Henry was his subordinate. She was just a convicted prisoner, a so-called witch. Do you not even trust your own men? She asked lightly. The ones who fought beside you in war? Ian answered immediately. People are complex. He's a good soldier. That doesn't make him perfect. He looked directly at her. So answer me. Nothing happened? Rosen held his gaze, then decided to take pity on him. It's nothing like that, she said casually. We were just talking. Apparently, he was too shy to thank me in front of everyone. She smirked faintly. But trust me, I wouldn't waste my time with a big baby like him. Boring. And it's clear he couldn't give me what I wanted anyway, so what's the use? Ian's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you manage to deceive everyone? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. It's obvious, he continued. You're always looking for a chance to lie. Even now, I can read you like a book. Rosen smiled slowly. Would you like to know how I managed to deceive everyone? Ian didn't respond. Instead of standing over her, he quietly sat down in front of her. Because I didn't deceive anyone, Rosen said calmly. They just pretend to be deceived. Ian frowned slightly. What do you mean? It doesn't matter whether I'm a good liar or not, she said. People only hear what they want to hear. No one truly cares about the truth. They just need a scapegoat, someone they can point at without feeling guilty. So I say whatever I want, knowing nothing will change regardless of what I say. She tilted her head, smiling. But I suppose you really are a hero. So noble of you to even take time to worry about a lowly prisoner like me. Ian ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back. Then he looked at her quietly. Then tell me, he asked, do you also consider me a hero? Rosen laughed softly. Does it surprise you that even a criminal like me would look up to a hero? Ian rubbed the back of his neck. No, I didn't mean... I had a crush on you. Like everyone else, she said casually. The sudden confession froze him in place. Seeing his expression, she added lightly, I'm a citizen too, you know. Are you offended? I used to collect those flyers with your face whenever they rained from the sky. He looked genuinely surprised. You collected them? She nodded. It's nothing strange. You know that, right? Know what? That you're a good-looking man, she replied with a grin. The words slipped out too easily. Realizing what she had just said, her face flushed. She quickly turned away. So don't bother Henry, she muttered. And please send the cabin maids back. I need to get dressed. I won't do anything. You can post guards outside if you're worried. Ian slowly stood up. He stepped forward and offered her his hand. Rosen blinked in surprise. I'm not offended, he said quietly. I was just... taken aback. He looked at her steadily. And I think you were right. We're not that different. Her heart skipped. So let's go, he added. Go where? She asked slowly, reaching out hesitantly. To get you dressed, he replied. It's time for the dinner you were so excited about. Before she could think further, she placed her hand in his. In one swift motion, Ian pulled her up, and the next second, he lifted her onto his shoulder like luggage. Wait, what are you doing? She shouted, startled and furious. Just send the maids back. There's no telling what you might do, Ian replied firmly as he walked. I can't trust you. He stopped briefly and added in a lower tone. It was a mistake to obey the captain's order, and now I can't even trust Henry. He set her down inside the dressing room and refastened the handcuffs securely. So I'll handle it myself. He looked directly at her. Saving the child, now everyone has a soft spot for you except me. His voice remained calm. I will not underestimate you. Rosen scoffed. What? Are you afraid of me? Afraid I might escape? Ian held her gaze. Yes, I am afraid of you, he answered plainly. The honesty stunned her. He had the authority, the strength, the control. Why would he be afraid? Ian stepped back and called for the maids to enter. I'll be outside, he said shortly. He stood by the door himself, guarding it. Inside, Rosen stared at his silhouette through the gap. She still didn't understand. Why was he afraid of her? A moment earlier, Ian's eyes had fallen on the belongings brought into his study from his luggage. His brows furrowed. Among the neatly stacked items lay a file, one he had specifically ordered to be burned. Yet it was still there. Assuming it was a simple miscommunication, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were carefully collected newspaper articles, and throughout the collection, one name had been circled again and again in red ink. Rosen Walker. Ian stared at it in silence, a cigar burning slowly between his lips. At first, it had only been something to pass the time. A habit. A distraction to survive the endless days that came after the war. After the war, every night he dreamed the same dream. His aircraft spiraling down, sinking into dark water, the cold swallowing him whole. It was a nightmare that hunted him relentlessly. He knew he was not in a good place, not in the right state of mind, but no one could ever know that. He could not afford to break. He was the symbol of victory. One night, unable to sleep, he had picked up a newspaper. He read without truly reading, forcing words into his mind without understanding them. Sometimes his eyes stopped at one word, Rierton. The city reduced to ruins because of a choice he had made. But nowhere in those articles was his name blamed. Instead, they spoke of a witch, a villain, a scapegoat, a name manufactured by the press, the government, the military. Rosen Howers. From that day onward, it was as though he had been bewitched. He searched for her name everywhere. To him, she felt like another version of himself. In a way, they both carried misfortune. But if they were both simply cursed by fate, why did the world see them so differently? Why was she labeled a witch, evil and unforgivable, while he was labeled a hero, the savior of the nation? She had taken one life deliberately. He had taken more than 15,000 unwillingly. If the weight of their sins were placed side by side, whose would be heavier? Sometimes, a quiet thought whispered inside him. Run away. Don't get caught. Go far away and live the rest of your life. Witch or not, innocent or guilty. Ian Connor did not truly care, because she was the one person who had survived Rierton, the one person he had been able to save, if only by accident. Who would have imagined that the man praised as the nation's hero was in reality this broken inside, that somewhere inside he was quietly rooting for a convicted criminal to escape? And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.